The moment I saw her wrist, everything inside me froze, like someone had pressed pause on the entire ballroom. The chandeliers were still sparkling, the string quartet was still playing that soft, expensive music people pretend to understand, and the Manhattan skyline glittered beyond the glass windows of the Plaza Hotel. But my world narrowed to one thing: the bracelet on her arm. The bracelet I bought for my husband. I recognized it instantly, not because it was a Tiffany design. Half the women in that room were dripping in Tiffany, but because of the tiny scratch on the clasp. A flaw I'd noticed the day I bought it, standing under those bright Fifth Avenue lights, holding my breath as if I were choosing a promise instead of jewelry. And now that promise was on a stranger's arm. A much younger stranger, who was scratching her wrist like it was on fire. "Oh my God," she whispered to her friend, laughing awkwardly. "I think this bracelet is giving me a rash. Jason said it looked perfect on me, but it feels like it hates my skin." Jason, my husband. I felt the floor shift beneath my heels. Linda, my neighbor and self-appointed guardian angel with zero filter, leaned toward me and muttered, "Well, honey, if the jewelry is rejecting her, maybe it knows something he doesn't." I didn't laugh. Couldn't. My chest tightened as I watched the young woman, glamorous, confident, maybe 35, lift her wrist under the ballroom lights. The charm I chose reflected a soft glimmer, the same glimmer I remembered seeing when Jason said months ago, "I'll wear it when it's special." Apparently special meant on someone else. Jason hadn't noticed me yet. He was across the room, effortlessly charming a circle of donors, his smile wide, his tuxedo crisp. When they laughed, he touched the back of one woman's chair the same way he touched mine the first year we dated, lightly, intimately, as if claiming space that wasn't his. The young woman kept scratching. "I swear, this thing is cursed," she joked, and her friend giggled. I stepped closer, pretending to admire the decorations. Her perfume floated in the air, bright, floral, youthful, a version of life I no longer pretended belonged to me. "Excuse me," I said gently. "May I see your bracelet? It's beautiful." She beamed, completely unaware she was holding my heartbreak on her wrist. "Of course. My boyfriend gave it to me a few weeks ago, said it was meant for me." Meant for her. The words hit harder than the betrayal itself. I lifted the bracelet gently, turning it just enough to see the underside. And there it was, the small engraving, the one I chose, the one I paid extra for. Only half visible now because her skin was inflamed where the metal rubbed against it. The irritation looked painful, but not as painful as what I felt in my chest. She pulled her hand back to scratch again. "I love it, but it's so itchy." Linda whispered beside me. "Sweetheart, some things only itch when they don't belong to you." I swallowed hard. "Where did he get it?" I asked softly. "Oh, Tiffany," she said. "Fifth Avenue. Jason said it was special. Said he picked it out just for." She didn't finish, because Jason appeared behind her, placing a hand on her lower back. A gesture a husband shouldn't reserve for anyone else. His face changed when he saw me. Only for a moment, but I caught it. The flicker of panic, the tightening of his jaw, the quick sweep of his eyes toward the bracelet. Then, as if he could erase what I'd seen, he smiled. "Maggie," he said warmly, too warmly, "I didn't know you were over here." I stared at him, the ballroom lights reflecting off the bracelet that was supposed to be his. Some lies whisper, some lies bruise, and some lies sparkle. Jason's smile stayed frozen on his face, but I didn't stay long enough to watch it crack. I excused myself, pretending I needed air, though what I really needed was time. Time to remember how on earth I ended up loving a man 15 years younger than me. A man who once made me believe age wasn't a disadvantage, but a kind of quiet magic. Outside the ballroom, I stood near a marble pillar, letting my breathing catch up with me. The city lights shimmered through the tall windows, and for a moment, my mind drifted back to the beginning, back when everything felt soft and possible. I met Jason 3 years ago at my bookstore. He walked in on a rainy afternoon wearing a drenched hoodie, shaking rain from his hair like a wet golden retriever. He asked if we had Meditations by Marcus Aurelius because he was trying to become a deeper person. Looking back, maybe he should have started with Basic Honesty for Beginners. He stayed for almost an hour, wandering between shelves, asking questions, making jokes that weren't always funny but were always earnest. When I recommended a few books, he said, "You should be a therapist. You read people too well. I didn't read him well at all. That was the irony. Linda remembers that day better than I do. She walked into the shop, took one look at him, and whispered loudly, "Is that your new delivery boy, or are we adopting strays now?" Jason laughed harder than he should have. I blushed harder than I wanted to. One thing led to another. Coffee runs, long conversations in Central Park, evenings where he played music from his iPhone while I cooked dinner, pretending not to notice how he kept stealing glances at me like a teenager with a forbidden crush. He made me feel chosen. When you're 55 and widowed, you don't expect to be chosen again. You expect to become a quiet footnote in your own story. But Jason read my loneliness like a map. He filled it with attention. Flowers, small surprises, weekend drives in his Mercedes just to listen to the city breathe. He'd tilt his head and say, "Mags, you're the most captivating woman I know." Nobody had said something like that to me since my first husband passed. Even Linda admitted, "Okay, fine, he's charming. Like a rescue cat, pretty eyes, unpredictable behavior." I laughed the first time she said it. I didn't laugh later, when I realized she was more right than wrong. Our wedding was simple but beautiful. A rooftop in Brooklyn Heights, twilight sky glowing gold. Jason wore a blue suit, looking at me like the whole world had aligned for that moment. And maybe, for a time it had. Our early marriage was gentle. He brought me Starbucks on weekends, made playlists for our morning walks, kissed my forehead before leaving for work. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. So when he asked me to let him pick the right moment to wear the bracelet I gave him, after I'd spent half a month's bookstore revenue on it, I believed him. I believed everything he said back then. That's what love does. It hands you a blindfold and calls it trust. A soft voice pulled me out of my memories. "You okay?" It was a waiter, holding a tray of champagne glasses. He looked young enough to still believe heartbreaks can be solved with dessert. I managed a nod. He hesitated, then whispered, "If you need to cry, the women's restroom has better lighting." I almost laughed, almost. "Thank you," I said. "Also," he added, leaning in, "the guy you came with? He's talking to the itchy lady again. Thought you might want a heads up." That did it. I wasn't sure whether to cry, scream, or tip the boy for honesty. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and walked back toward the ballroom, because whatever was happening, I needed to see it with my own eyes. And as I stepped inside again, I caught Jason brushing a stray hair from Sophie's cheek. It wasn't the act that broke me. It was the familiarity of it. I didn't storm over. Women my age don't storm. We glide with purpose, fueled by dignity and a lifetime of learning when to speak and when to wait. But inside, my pulse thudded like someone had set a jazz drummer loose in my ribcage. Jason was still touching Sophie's cheek when he spotted me. His hand snapped back so fast you'd think her skin was electrified. Sophie looked startled, then embarrassed, then suddenly fascinated by the ceiling. "Hey, Mags," Jason said, voice cracking on the second word. "We were just, talking about the music." "The music?" I repeated. "Yes," Sophie blurted out. "He was explaining violins." "In a jazz quartet?" I said calmly. Sophie blinked. "Are violins not here?" I nodded. "Not even hiding." Her face flushed. Jason tugged at his collar as if loosening it would loosen the situation. Before he could attempt another excuse, Linda appeared behind me like a guardian angel with comedic timing. "Well, look at you three," she said, clasping her hands dramatically. "If awkwardness were a sport, you'd make the nationals." Jason's jaw tightened. "Linda, not now." "Oh, trust me, sweetheart," she said, patting his arm. "You don't get to choose now. That ship sailed, hit an iceberg, and sank." Sophie coughed, a delicate little sound, and began scratching her wrist again, harder this time. "Sorry," she muttered. "This bracelet, I don't know why it hates me." Linda squinted at her wrist like a jeweler with a magnifying glass. "Maybe it's allergic to guilt." I shot her a look, but she only raised her eyebrows innocently. Jason tried to redirect. "Let's all take a breath. Emotions are high." "I'm quite calm," I said. He blinked. "You are? That's what should concern you." He opened and closed his mouth like a goldfish searching for meaning. Meanwhile, Sophie's scratching intensified. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It's getting worse." Her wrist was turning blotchy, angry red, almost matching her dress. I leaned slightly closer. "Did Jason tell you to clean it with perfume? He used to do that with his watches." "Yes," she exclaimed. "He said it makes jewelry last longer." I looked at her kindly. It doesn't. It ruins the coating. Sophie froze, realization dawning. So he doesn't know anything about jewelry. Oh, he knows one thing, Linda said. How to steal it from the wrong woman. Jason groaned. Will you stop? I'm trying, she replied, but comedy is my coping mechanism. A waiter walked by and, noticing Sophie's frantic scratching, asked, Ma'am, would you like some ice? Yes, please, she said desperately. Linda sniffed. Get a bucket. The waiter hurried off. Jason exhaled sharply. Maggie, can we talk privately? Of course, I said, surprising him. But before that, I turned to Sophie, keeping my voice soft. Could you show me the clasp? She hesitated, then extended her wrist. There it was. The engraving, the tiny charm, the scratch on the clasp that Tiffany offered to buff out, but I insisted made it uniquely ours. It was uniquely mine. I touched it lightly, feeling the coldness of the metal. Beautiful, isn't it? Sophie said weakly. Yes, I replied, meeting her eyes. It is. Jason stepped between us quickly, his voice strained. Maggie, please, let's talk outside. I let him lead me toward the balcony, the city sparkling behind glass doors. Linda followed like a bodyguard until Jason spun around and said, Not you. Well, you clearly need supervision, she muttered, but she stopped, barely. Jason closed the door behind us. Maggie, I can explain. I'm sure you can, I said. You've always had a talent for storytelling. He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. I sighed. Jason, there is no version of this where I find out, and thank you for your thoughtful timing. His face tightened. I got confused. Between me and her, I asked, or between right and wrong? He didn't answer. And in that silence, thin, fragile, ringing with cowardice, I realized something painful but freeing. The man who once made me feel young had finally made himself look small. When we returned inside, the gala was still in full swing, champagne bubbling, donors laughing, the quartet playing a song that felt far too cheerful for the implosion happening in my chest. Jason walked a step ahead of me, shoulders tense, probably hoping I'd magically forget the bracelet situation the moment dessert was served. Clearly, after 43 years of living, he still didn't understand women. Especially not women over 50, with excellent memory and nothing left to lose. We reached our table. Sophie was holding an ice-filled cloth to her wrist while trying to maintain dignity. Linda sat beside her, casually stirring her drink like she was hosting a talk show. Oh good, you're back, Linda said cheerfully. I was just explaining to young Sophie here that allergic reactions are nature's way of telling us when something doesn't belong to us. Jason nearly choked on air. Linda? She shrugged. Science is science. Sophie looked at me with confused, pained sincerity. Did Jason ever mention, that his wife was coming tonight? I smiled gently. You're talking to her. Her eyes widened so dramatically, I worried they'd fall into her champagne. Oh my God, oh my. Jason told me you were, well, older. But I thought he meant like 50. Linda grinned. Sweetheart, 50 is older if you're 12. I tried not to laugh, but a tiny snort escaped. A dignified snort, if such a thing exists. Sophie sank into her chair. I'm so embarrassed. You shouldn't be, I said honestly. Embarrassment belongs to the person who lied to both of us. Jason looked at me sharply, but before he could say anything stupid, his specialty, the MC, announced that dessert was being served. Small plates of creme brulee appeared, each with a perfect caramel dome. Sophie tried to eat with one hand, the other still icing her wrist, and when the spoon bounced off the hardened sugar, she yelped in surprise. Linda leaned in. Sweetheart, you have to crack it like you mean it. Soft women don't survive in this world. Sophie smacked it so hard the caramel shell shot across the table and landed in Jason's lap. I covered my mouth. Not to stifle a scream, no, to hide the laugh threatening to escape. He jumped up, mortified. For God's sake, Linda patted his arm. Relax. Consider it the universe flicking you. That nearly broke me. I excused myself again, this time heading toward the hallway leading to the restrooms. I didn't need the restroom. I needed space. Space to think, space to breathe, space to rearrange the chaos into something I could analyze, like one of my old literature lessons. As I passed a mirrored column, I caught my reflection. Strong shoulders, tired eyes. A woman who had survived grief once and was preparing to survive betrayal now. I stepped into a quieter corridor. Jason followed moments later, breath uneven. Maggie, he said, catching up. Can we please talk where people aren't watching? Are you worried about appearances? I asked. That's not fair. Neither is cheating, I said calmly. His jaw ticked. Nothing happened. I saw the bracelet. He exhaled sharply. That doesn't mean anything. It means, I said, choosing each word carefully, that something once mine is now on another woman's wrist, and she's scratching like the universe is warning her. He laughed weakly. You're overreacting. Am I? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Why does she think you bought it for her? Why does she know you're cologne? Why does she call you Jace? How does she know you're allergic to shrimp? And why? I held his gaze steady. Does she touch your arm the same way I did before you stopped caring? Jason opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Can't we just forget tonight? I blinked once, slowly. Jason, I am 58. I forget where I park sometimes, but I do not forget betrayal. Behind him, Linda suddenly appeared from nowhere, again with a slice of cake. Anyone want a bite? She asked, as if the hallway were a picnic. Jason groaned. Linda, please. Hush, she said, thrusting the plate into my hand. Sugar helps decision-making. Proven fact. I took a bite. It did help, actually. I looked at Jason, then at the cake, then back at Jason. And in that moment, a decision sparked. Not loud, not dramatic, just a small, solid flame. I would find the truth. All of it. Even the parts he prayed I never uncovered. The morning after the gala, Jason acted as if the universe had hit a reset button overnight. He hummed while making coffee, kissed the top of my head, and asked if I wanted to go on a weekend getaway, just to reconnect. Reconnect? Men truly have a talent for underestimating women who iron their own wounds quietly. I stirred my oatmeal calmly and asked, "Where were you planning to go?" He froze. I hadn't thought that far. Of course he hadn't. Plans take effort. Lies take improvisation. When he left for work, I watched him from the kitchen window as he got into his Mercedes, adjusting the mirrors like a man preparing for a day of deceit. Linda slipped into my apartment seconds later. She doesn't knock anymore. She just materializes when emotional turbulence is detected. She carried a tote bag filled with snacks, a pair of oversized reading glasses, and what appeared to be a manila folder labeled, Men, a Study. I assume you're here to help, I said. No, she said, grabbing a muffin. I'm here to lead. She plopped down at the dining table. Let's open his digital closet. I'm not hacking anything, I said firmly. I want the truth, not a crime. Who said hacking? We're just doing publicly accessible excavation. My eyebrow went up. She clarified, email receipts. That was unfortunately legal. So I opened my MacBook Air and logged into our shared bank statement portal. As soon as the transactions loaded, Linda's jaw dropped. Sweetheart, she whispered, your husband has been whining and dining like a man with 2 anniversaries. Restaurant charges at places we'd never been. Boutique purchases. Rideshare receipts to neighborhoods he claimed he never had reason to visit. Hotel stays labeled as client events. Impressive, since his job involved PowerPoint presentations and lukewarm office coffee. Do you see this? Linda said, pointing with a pretzel stick. This is a luxury steakhouse. Jason eats steak with ketchup, Maggie. That alone was enough to suggest infidelity. But then came the real hit. A Tiffany & Co. purchase dated 2 weeks before I gave him the bracelet. Linda put her hand dramatically on her chest. Oh Lord, he double-dipped the jewelry. I clicked open the invoice. This isn't the bracelet, I said. He bought something else. Then where is it? Linda asked. That exactly the question burning in my chest. A moment later, a new email notification popped up. Jason had forwarded me a digital receipt for our internet bill, probably to look responsible. Linda snorted. Imagine cheating with Tiffany bills and still remembering the Wi-Fi. Men contain multitudes. We moved on to reviewing his calendar. He had blocked off entire afternoons labeled meeting, client pitch, strategy session. Meanwhile, his company's official newsletters, which I received because I once subscribed accidentally, showed no such events. I leaned back, rubbing my temples. I can't tell what's worse, the cheating or the administrative laziness. There's more, Linda warned, zooming the screen. Look at this rideshare receipt. He went to Sophie's boutique the night before the gala. I stared at the screen. The timestamp was 8:47 p.m. Precisely when he told me he was still at the office finishing a deck. This man, Linda said, shaking her head, would lie even if the truth was on sale. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My chest felt tight, but not from despair, from clarity. Each piece of evidence wasn't just proof he betrayed me. It was proof I had ignored myself long enough. Linda reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're doing good, sweetheart. Pain is loud, but truth is louder." I nodded, swallowing. Then her phone pinged. She glanced at the screen and grinned mischievously. "Well, would you look at that? Sophie just posted an Instagram story. Her wrist is wrapped like she fought a bracelet in hand-to-hand combat." Despite everything, a laugh escaped me. Linda smirked. "Should we pay her a little visit?" "No," I said softly. "She doesn't know she's part of a larger story." I closed the MacBook. "But I think it's time she found out." I didn't want to storm into Sophie's boutique like some vengeful tornado wearing sensible shoes. Women my age don't need theatrics, we weaponize calm. So the next afternoon I walked in quietly, letting the soft chime of the door announce me. The boutique smelled of expensive fabric and questionable financial decisions. Sophie stood behind the counter, her wrist wrapped in a fresh bandage. When she saw me, her smile flickered, then vanished entirely. "Oh," she whispered. "It's you." I nodded. "It's me." For a moment we just looked at each other, two women tied together by the same man, the same bracelet, and the same miserable taste in partners. She swallowed. "Is Jason okay?" "That depends," I said. "Are we measuring physical health or moral health?" She winced. "Right." I gestured toward a display table. "May I sit?" "Of course." She hurried to move a stack of scarves, accidentally knocking over a mannequin hand that clattered loudly to the floor. She froze, horrified. I bent down, picked it up, and placed it back upright. "Relax, I've survived worse things than plastic fingers." A tiny, nervous laugh slipped out of her. It was the first sign she wasn't my enemy. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "About everything. I didn't know he was married. He told me you two were separated and living like roommates, and that you, needed a younger man to feel alive." I blinked, inhaled, and exhaled slowly. "Creative. Wrong, but creative." "And he said you were cold to him," she added softly. I stared. "Cold?" "I once woke up at 2 a.m. to make him homemade soup because he sneezed twice." Her eyebrows shot up. "Twice?" "Yes. 2 whole sneezes. Catastrophic." She covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. "Oh my God, he said he was bedridden with fever." I shook my head. "He ate the soup, watched Netflix, and asked for ice cream." She sat beside me, eyes lowering. "I've been so stupid." "You're not stupid," I said gently. "You were misinformed, there's a difference." She hesitated, then whispered, "I thought he loved me." I nodded. "I once thought he loved me too." Her eyes glistened. Then her wrist started itching again, violently. She groaned. "I swear this bracelet cursed my skin and my life." "May I see it?" I asked. She slid it off and handed it to me. Her relief at removing it was practically spiritual. The moment the bracelet touched my palm, something inside me tightened. The engraving, the scratch, the weight. I remembered the day I bought it. "It was for him," she said quietly. "He told me he hated jewelry, but he wore this one because it reminded him of me." My jaw clenched. "He told me he never wore it because he wanted to save it for something meaningful." "Oh," she whispered. "So, he lied to both of us." "Yes," I said, equally and without discrimination. She sank into the chair, defeated. "I'm sorry, truly, for your marriage, for not seeing it, for believing him." I nodded, appreciating the sincerity. "I didn't come here to attack you. I came because I think you deserve the truth, and I need it too." She wiped her eyes. "Then ask me anything." I opened my phone and pulled up a rideshare receipt. "Why was he at your boutique the night before the gala?" She hesitated, then sighed. "He came to give me a necklace, to match the bracelet. He said he didn't want to wear his bracelet at the event because, well..." I raised an eyebrow. "Because?" "Because he said you'd make it dramatic." I let out a breath somewhere between a laugh and a groan. That man wouldn't recognize irony if it jumped in his tax returns. Sophie covered her heart. "Speaking of tax returns, he paid me through your business account, didn't he?" I stared at her. "You knew?" "I didn't at first, but the deposit had your bookstore's name on it. I thought he was just weirdly involved in local literature." Despite the madness, I laughed. "He hasn't read a book since 2012. She sighed again. "I'm so sorry." I reached out, gently touching her bandaged wrist. "You're part of the damage, not the cause." Her eyes softened. "What now?" I held the bracelet between us, feeling its cold truth settle. "Now," I said quietly, "I stopped letting him control the story. I didn't go home right away after leaving Sophie's boutique. Instead, I walked to a small cafe in Brooklyn Heights, the one with dim lights, quiet jazz, and pastries that taste like emotional support in sugar form. I needed a moment to gather myself before facing the next storm. Linda, of course, had no such patience. The minute I texted her, "We need to talk," she replied, "Already outside. Order me a latte." And sure enough, by the time my coffee arrived, she marched in, sunglasses on even though it was cloudy, holding a bag of pretzels like she was entering a negotiation. She sat across from me and said, "Okay, tell me everything before my blood pressure makes decisions for me." I told her. About Sophie. About the changing stories. About the necklace. About the deposit from my bookstore account. Linda didn't blink once. When I finished, she calmly opened her purse, pulled out her phone, and said, "I'm calling David." I grabbed her wrist. "Linda, I don't want to drag your son into." "You're not dragging him, you're hiring him," she corrected. "Big difference. He has a real job." "Exactly. A job involving numbers and justice, two things your husband is allergic to." I sighed. There was no stopping her. David arrived 20 minutes later, tall, composed, wearing a navy jacket and carrying a laptop bag that said, "I know how to ruin a fraudulent man's week." He greeted me kindly. "Mom said you needed help." "She said it like that?" I asked. He smiled. "She said, bring your laptop. Maggie's gonna need spreadsheets." Linda beamed proudly. We moved to a corner booth. David opened his MacBook Pro, fingers poised. "Start from the top." I showed him the receipts, the boutique payments, the rideshare logs, the Tiffany invoice. He reviewed everything quietly, then lifted one eyebrow, the eyebrow of a man who had just discovered a buffet of stupidity. "So," he said slowly, "your husband is not only cheating, he is financially incompetent." Linda clapped once. "I told you," David continued. "The transfers from your bookstore account raise a big red flag. If the IRS sees this, they may assume you're involved, not him." My stomach dropped. I didn't know. I never saw a statement with those. "That's because he intentionally labeled them as consulting fees and inventory reimbursements," David explained. "Classic diversion tactic. Sloppy, though." Linda shook her head. "Sloppy is his brand." David ignored her. "You'll need to isolate your accounts, create a record of every unauthorized transaction, and prepare to show intent. His intent, not yours." I exhaled shakily. "I'm overwhelmed." "That's normal," he said gently. "But you're not powerless. People underestimate women your age. Jason certainly did. And that's his biggest mistake." Linda smirked. "Well, that and buying gifts for his mistress with his wife's tax ID." David opened another document. "And he's made himself vulnerable at work, too. These charges at restaurants, hotels, luxury boutiques. If his company sees this, they may investigate misuse of expense accounts." I blinked. "He's been putting things on, corporate tabs?" "Some," David confirmed. "Not enough to send him to prison tonight, but enough to terrify him tomorrow." Linda placed a pretzel in my hand like it was a medal. "Congratulations, your husband is a walking red flag with hair gel." Despite everything, I laughed, a real surprised laugh. David leaned forward. "Maggie, here's the important part. You need documentation. Every receipt, every email, every timestamp, and don't confront him yet. The element of quiet works in your favor." Quiet. That word felt powerful in my chest. I'd spent months feeling invisible in my own marriage. Now invisibility could become a weapon. I looked at the pile of screenshots, statements, notes we'd gathered. For the first time since the gala, the fear in my stomach shifted into determination. David folded his laptop. "You're going to be okay." Linda squeezed my shoulder. "You're going to be better than okay. You're going to be expensive." I blinked at her. "Expensive?" "Emotionally," she clarified, "and legally for him." I couldn't help it. I laughed again. And somewhere in that warm, messy, frightening afternoon, I realized something. I wasn't breaking. I was preparing. Jason's birthday arrived far too quickly for a man who deserved far too little. I booked a table at the River Cafe overlooking the Manhattan skyline, partly because the view is breathtaking, and partly because I wanted him to feel small in comparison to something majestic. When we arrived, he looked delighted. "This is beautiful, Mags." "It is," I agreed. "Beauty deserves witnesses." He didn't understand the sentence. That was fine. He'd understand soon. One by one, the witnesses arrived. First was Linda, wearing a sequined jacket that glimmered like a disco ball with opinions. Jason blinked. "Why is Linda here?" "It's your birthday," she said brightly. "I brought emotional support." Before he could object, two of Jason's coworkers entered, Tom and Derek. Jason paled. What are they doing here? They said they wanted to celebrate, I replied simply. Tom and Derek exchanged a look that said, we came for the free food, we're staying for the drama, and then Sophie stepped inside. Her wrist was wrapped, her face anxious, her steps hesitant. She scanned the room until she saw Jason and then saw me. A flush crept up her neck. You invited her? Jason whispered sharply. No, I said. She invited herself. Truth has a way of showing up. Linda clapped once. Everyone's here, like a reunion of people who shouldn't know each other. Jason shot her a look that could curdle milk. We took our seats. A waiter poured wine. The silence was so heavy it nearly bent the silverware. So, Jason began, sweating slightly. What's the occasion? The truth, I said. His Adam's apple bobbed. I lifted a manila folder from my bag and placed it gently on the table. The sound it made was small, but the effect immediate. Jason stiffened. Maggie, what is that? Your life, I said. On paper. Tom and Derek leaned in like they were watching a high-budget courtroom drama. I opened the folder, receipts, transfers, Tiffany invoices, rideshare logs, restaurant bills, payments to Sophie, his misuse of my bookstore's tax ID. Jason's face drained so fast he looked like someone had unplugged him. Maggie, he croaked. Linda lifted her wine glass. Oh, don't mind me, I'm just hydrating during the collapse of a man. Jason snapped at her. Stay out of this. She sipped. Impossible. I've waited months. Sophie looked horrified. Jason, you paid me with her business account? Jason rubbed his forehead. I can explain. Tom whispered. You probably shouldn't. Jason glared. Stay out of it, Tom. Tom raised both hands. Hey man, I'm just here for the cake. The waiter returned at that exact moment holding a birthday cake with sparklers shooting upward like miniature fireworks. He started singing Happy Birthday with cheerful gusto, alone, because no one else joined in. Not even the sparklers seemed committed. They fizzled out halfway. Jason muttered, This is ridiculous. What's ridiculous, I said softly, is thinking you could lie to multiple women, commit tax fraud, and still expect creme brulee afterward. The waiter blinked. Should I put the cake down? Yes, Linda answered, ideally in front of someone innocent. He said it near me. Jason reached for my hand. Maggie, I love you. I made mistakes, but I can fix this. I pulled my hand back like his touch was a hot stove. Jason, you didn't make mistakes. You made a lifestyle. Even Sophie let out a tiny, shocked laugh. Jason's voice cracked. You're ending our marriage? No, I said. You ended our marriage. I'm just making it official. Linda raised her wine again. To endings, Tom added, and new beginnings. Sophie whispered, and aloe vera. This rash isn't going away. I exhaled, not with pain, but with release, like opening a window in a long-closed room. I stood up calmly, gathering my purse. Enjoy your cake, Jason. You'll need the sugar. Why? He asked, voice trembling. Because, I said gently, you're going to be dealing with lawyers tomorrow. His face broke. Mine didn't. Jason didn't come home that night. A mercy, really, for both of us. When I woke up the next morning, there was a text from him that read, I need time to think. Linda, who had slept on my couch for crisis supervision, squinted at the message and said, He needs time to think? Sweetheart, that man can't even choose between two salad dressings. I laughed despite myself. He's spiraling. Good, she replied. Let him spiral. Maybe he'll finally reach the bottom where his common sense is hiding. After breakfast, David arrived with a laptop, 3 folders, and the calm determination of someone who had professionally dismantled men like Jason before lunch. He spread everything out on my dining table, like a legal charcuterie board. All right, he said, adjusting his glasses. Here's what happens next. Linda leaned in. Is it jail? Please say it's jail. David sighed, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. She pouted dramatically. He turned to me. Maggie, we need to file for financial protection immediately. Jason misused your business tax ID to make payments to Sophie. That alone could trigger an IRS inquiry. Then there are the unauthorized transfers and the falsified labels on your joint account. I nodded. I'd braced myself for this. Still, hearing it laid out so plainly was like letting cold water run down my spine. What about his job? I asked. David opened another document. I've looked up his company's compliance policies, misreporting expenses, personal luxury purchases on corporate accounts. He's violated at least 3 internal rules. Linda clapped once. Yay, David gave her a look. Mom? What? I'm supporting the process. He continued. If his employer opens an investigation, his position could be suspended or terminated, and if they involve law enforcement. I exhaled slowly. He did this to himself. Linda squeezed my shoulder. And to your peace. But peace grows back. David pushed a stack of printed forms toward me. These are filings for account separation, fraud documentation, and protective measures for your bookstore. Once you sign, we submit. After that, the legal system takes over. I stared at the papers, not in fear, but in clarity. Okay, let's do it. Linda handed me her reading glasses, which had rhinestones shaped like tiny stars. Use mine. They give your decisions celestial authority. I put them on. Ridiculous. Comforting. Perfect. As I signed the last document, I felt something unclench in my chest, something old, tired, and done. David gathered everything neatly. I'll submit these within the hour. Thank you, I said. You're welcome. He hesitated, then added, You're handling this better than most people. Linda crossed her arms proudly. She's a phoenix. On sale, but still a phoenix. Mom, hush, let me hype her. Before they left, David checked his phone. Oh, there's news. What news? I asked. He turned the screen toward us. A public LinkedIn post from Jason's company. A short, curt announcement. We are reviewing internal matters involving one of our employees. Effective immediately, JC has been placed on leave. Linda leaned so close her glasses nearly touched the screen. Oh my God, he's the internal matter? I've always wanted to know one. I stared at the announcement, feeling not joy, not revenge, something quieter. Validation. He had gambled everything and lost to the truth. By noon, he finally called. His voice was frantic. Maggie, please, my company found out. They're saying I misused funds. I could lose my job. This is serious. Yes, I said softly. It is. You have to help me. I closed my eyes. Jason, I'm done helping you. Silence. Then a shaky breath. So this is it? This was it, I corrected. When I hung up, Linda appeared beside me, holding 2 cups of Starbucks like a celebratory offering. One is a calm tea, she said. The other is a caramel macchiato so sweet it erases mistakes. Pick whichever mood you're in. I took the macchiato. She smiled. Good. Revenge should always be enjoyed with sugar. Despite everything, despite months of deceit and heartbreak, I laughed. And for the first time in a long time, the air felt breathable again. The divorce hearing was surprisingly quiet. No shouting, no theatrics. Just the crisp rustle of papers and the faint hum of the courthouse air conditioning trying its best. Jason looked smaller than I had ever seen him, shoulders slumped, suit wrinkled, eyes darting nervously every few seconds. His lawyer did most of the talking. Jason mostly stared at the table like the wood grain held the answers to life. My lawyer presented the financial records David helped uncover. The judge frowned deeply, the kind of frown only a man who has seen too many foolish husbands can produce. When he ruled in my favor, protecting my bookstore, my savings, my home, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. Free. Outside the courthouse, Linda squeezed my arm. Congratulations, sweetheart. You're officially single, solvent, and ready to sparkle. I don't feel sparkly, I admitted. Sparkle comes later, she said. First comes breathing. So I breathed. For weeks, that's all I did. Morning walks along the Brooklyn Heights promenade with a Starbucks cup warming my hands. Organizing shelves in my bookstore, letting sunlight fall on my face through the front windows, rediscovering my quiet. People think healing is dramatic, a breakthrough, a sunrise, a sudden burst of joy. It isn't. It's ordinary, gentle, slow. It happens in folded laundry, warm tea, and nights when you finally sleep deeply again. One evening, I reopened the small piano in the bookstore, an old upright I'd kept mostly for decoration. I played a few hesitant notes, smiling at how rusty I'd become. The sound filled the shop like soft memory. That's when he stepped inside. Daniel, a familiar customer with kind eyes and silver hair, swept back neatly, holding a stack of books he wanted to donate. I didn't know you played, he said softly. I barely do, I replied. Well, he said, setting the books down, barely is enough to make a room feel alive. Something warm flickered in my chest. He stayed a while, browsing the shelves. We talked, not the urgent, needy conversations of 2 people rushing into something, but the comfortable, spacious kind that leave room for silence. He told me he played jazz piano at a small cafe on weekends. I told him I'd lost pieces of myself and was slowly collecting them again like scattered seashells. Before leaving, he hesitated. Would you perhaps like to hear me play sometime? I smiled. I think I would. Linda, who had been eavesdropping behind the new arrival's shelf, whispered loudly, "He's smitten." Daniel laughed. "I think your friend approves." "She approves everyone except my ex-husband," I said. "Well," he answered gently, "your ex-husband seems easy not to approve." I laughed, not politely, not nervously, but freely, the kind of laugh that comes only after you've survived something heavy. Weeks passed. I went to hear him play. He visited the shop more often. He never pushed, never demanded, never tried to fill my silences with noise. He simply existed beside me like warm light on cold skin. One evening he walked me home, our pace slow, matching without effort. At my door, he paused. "May I take you to dinner sometime?" he asked. "When you're ready." I looked at him. Steady, gentle, safe. A different kind of truth than the one I'd survived. "Yes," I said, "when I'm ready." And for the first time in months, ready didn't feel like a distant country. It felt near, possible, mine. Later that night, I opened the drawer where the infamous bracelet now rested. Not as a wound, not as a symbol, but simply an object from a life I'd outgrown. I closed the drawer gently, and with that small, quiet motion, something shifted inside me. Not bitterness, not sadness, just space. Space for breath, space for peace, space for beginnings. At 58, I thought my story was shrinking, but instead, it was opening. A few months later, on a soft spring morning, I opened the doors of my bookstore before the city had fully woken. Sunlight slipped across the wooden floors like warm silk. The air smelled faintly of paper and fresh tulips from the market, the kind I bought for myself now. Not because I needed them, but because I finally understood I deserved small, beautiful things without permission. Life had grown quiet again, but not the lonely kind of quiet. A peaceful quiet. A chosen quiet. Customers drifted in with sleepy smiles, some greeting me by name, some simply grateful for a warm space to browse before starting their day. I watched them move between shelves, fingers grazing book spines the way people touch memories. Daniel arrived just before noon, carrying 2 coffees, one for him, one for me, with the exact amount of milk I liked. He didn't knock. He never had to. He walked in as if stepping into a chapter he respected but didn't presume to rewrite. "I brought fuel," he said, handing me the cup. "And wisdom?" I teased. He nodded toward the battered piano in the corner. "Only if you'll play the first note." I laughed, a soft-heeled kind of laugh, and sat beside him. Our shoulders brushed. He began playing a gentle melody, something quiet and steady, something like hope. For a moment, I closed my eyes. No courtroom, no betrayal, no bracelet. Just music. And breath, and the simple truth that it's never too late to feel whole again. When I opened my eyes, sunlight had shifted, casting long golden lines across the floor. "I'm glad you stayed," I said softly. Daniel smiled. "I'm glad you opened the door." And in that ordinary, extraordinary moment, I realized, some endings aren't endings at all. They're invitations.